Hello, CMST 1545 students. I'm Brian Duricy. I'll be giving my speech in a moment, but first I'd just like to show you my audience.
Hi.
All right. Thank you, Nana. All right. Since we're all in college, I'm sure we've all wondered at some point in time, what are we doing here? According to an article from the Washington Post, the main reason why people go to college is just to get a better job than had they not gone. But a separate Washington Post article tells us that only 13% of Americans actually like going to work. So what if there was a different but still feasible option? Luckily, there is, in the form of a universal basic income. A universal basic income, as we will see, is not just necessary to lift people out of poverty, but is politically and economically feasible in the United States. I personally care about this topic because, as somebody who envisions my future being both working in a quantitative field and pursuing artistic endeavors, I often wonder what my life would be like if I could only devote myself to the latter. In a center-right country like the United States, we might not believe that a universal basic income is something that we could see, but it in fact enjoys support on both the right and the left. Before we go into why a universal basic income is necessary, we must first examine what exactly it is. According to the Basic Income Earth Network, a universal basic income has 5 distinct components. That it must be paid in cash, that it must be paid repeatedly, and that it must be paid individually, unconditionally, and universally. Next, with something this simple, we must wonder how in fact it could affect the United States, specifically the state of the poor. In the United States, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are 13.5% of American citizens currently in poverty, thus representing the blue portion on this graph. A universal basic income is the best and most efficient way to reduce poverty levels in the United States. But we must wonder, with all of the welfare programs available in the country, why would we choose a universal basic income? Simply put, because it is the most effective welfare program available. A New York Times Magazine article explored a UBI project in Kenya, and they noted that universal basic income was a much more effective form of welfare than other forms of aid given to the same Kenyan citizens, such as shoes or too many water tanks. Simply put, a UBI reduces the middleman in the equation and directly gives power to the people who need it most, those who know exactly what they need, as opposed to outside organizations simply trying to guess. But even if this is the case, we must wonder if such a thing is actually politically feasible in the United States. Luckily, it in fact is. The United States actually has the infrastructure already in place to implement a universal basic income. Going back to the New York Times article, they noted that during the time the UBI scheme was first put in place, Kenya had a very threadbare banking system. So what Kenyan citizens did instead was take the payments and have them directly put into mobile banking accounts, usually on mobile phones. In the United States, we wouldn't see much of a problem in this regard. According to the Chicago Tribune, only 7% of American citizens don't have a bank account, and according to the Pew Research Center, 95% of American citizens have a mobile device of some kind. Thus, it would be quite easy for the government to directly give payments to American citizens with little effort on the part of the citizens themselves. And so with something being but even if something this simple could happen, we still have to look at what the left and the right would get out of it. According to an article from The Atlantic, one major conservative argument for the UBI is that it would drastically reduce other welfare programs. Going back again to the Kenyan example, as opposed to giving things out to people, we would simply replace all welfare programs with a UBI, and thus let people decide what in fact they would spend their money on, as opposed to, again, government simply guessing as to what people needed. For the left, leading magazine Jacobin writes that a universal basic income is necessary to lift people out of the tyranny of the job market. And so, with both the left and the right having something to fight for, we must wonder if in fact it is economically feasible. Luckily, it is. In another article from The Atlantic, they write, authors Matt Bruning and Elizabeth Stoker write that a universal basic income scheme, not even fully implemented, but one of just $3,000 to every American citizen, would turn the graph of American poverty from 13.5% here to cutting it in half to this graph. And so this is just something from a small universal basic income scheme, not even one that would be fully implemented to the full strength of replacing welfare programs with a UBI. And the major ways to pay for such a program again would enjoy support from the right and the left, as they pander to things that both sides like. For the right, we would be cutting bloated governmental programs, and for the left, we would be raising taxes on the wealthy, something that, according to Gallup, over 60% of American citizens believe that the wealthy are not paying enough in taxes. So this is just one way in which a national campaign could get started around a universal basic income and finding a reasonable way to pay for it. And so, when looking at a universal basic income, we've seen that not only is it necessary and quite effective in lifting people out of poverty, but it is politically and economically feasible even in the United States. What we can do as citizens is become more politically active, speak to our representatives, and generally spread awareness about UBIs. It has already come on the ballot in multiple European countries, and there is no reason why we couldn't see it on the ballot in the United States as well. Simply put, once we've found that there is another option besides work, why would we choose anything else? Thank you for watching.